Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. To those of you joining in today, we welcome you in. Halloween's approaching very fast now. You can see very carefully that the leaves are in fact turning. That tree is really holding on well this year. I always like that because it tends to drop branches on my property, and that's nobody's fault, but it's a life cycle of a tree. But as Halloween gets closer, I've been doing a little bit of research into the poison candy myth. Because as it turns out, there haven't really been any cases where children have been poisoned. The poison candy myth goes back to the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution is, of course, the first time where people started getting things from outside their homes. Before that, candy would be made by grandma or, mom or whatever the case might be, whoever was old and had some time. And that's what was given to the kids. Believe me, this mentality did not disappear for a long time. My grandfather in the 1950s was one of the first to have an indoor toilet. And people were like, oh, how can you have that thing? It's an indoor toilet. The sewer gas will come right into your home. As recently as the 1950s, people were suspicious of indoor toilets. So yeah, the Industrial Revolution covers a huge period of time. But during that time, people started to get a little bit nervous because these candies were suddenly being imported from factories, which they had no idea about. Now, they knew these factories were horrible places to work. Most people had jobs in them or knew somebody who had a job in a factory. And they would work them to death. They would, air conditioning. Are you joking? That's not happening. Water breaks. Are you kidding? 12 hours a day. You're there right from the second we say so, and you go home when we say so, and you'll get paid what we decide to get paid. So these factories of sadness, as I like to call them, were producing treats. And families were suspicious of these things because it would be very easy to make a mistake or to mix the wrong stuff together, and instead of candy, have a little bit of death. And I say this on purpose because it contrasts directly with our modern day and age where we're told not to accept homemade candy for similar reasons. We're worried that somebody could have slipped something in them. We're worried the baker might not follow the best hygiene. Baker, candy maker, dressmaker, don't care. And it's interesting how the entire myth has been twisted to fit the globalist internationalist conspiracy. They've made you suspicious of what your next door neighbor will give you, but it's okay to have something manufactured off in Taiwan or Korea or India or wherever. Nothing against the people in those places, and they don't intend to give us anything bad. But stuff happens and it gets lost in the mix. Much higher chance than your next door neighbor deciding they're going to poison children on Halloween. In the 1960s, especially in the United States, there was another phenomenon happening. And that was when communities started to integrate. The whole black meets white in the same neighborhood. Uh-oh, there goes the neighborhood, the old saying goes. I completely disagree with the saying, but that was the saying. I'm simply documenting history. And once again, we had this fanciful other, in quotes, coming into our, in quotes, territory. And the suspicion blew up again. How can we trust these strangers in our neighborhood? I mean, now I'd have a hard job walking down any street and not finding some sort of a couple with traditions different than mine. The apartment building I so like to show, I can't even imagine how many different cultures are there. But that's where this breeding ground of fear really comes from. It's the mistrust of others, the fact that others are different. It's one of those core psychological fears, and the news media gets off on it every year. Every year, check your apples for razor blades, don't accept homemade treats. There's a serial killer on every single block. Here's a funny thing. There have been no cases that have ever been proven to be poisoned. Now, there have been people who have tampered with candy. In 1959, there was a California dentist, William Shine, who gave laxative pills to kids. I have a lot of questions about that. He was caught, he was charged, and stuff like that. But I mean, laxatives? In the 1950s and 60s, these were actually considered somewhat healthy. And even today, laxatives are viewed as more positive than the other drugs on the market. At the same token, a dentist would very well be conscious of what he was doing to children. And you have to suspect that in his own bizarre fantasy world, he was doing something good. No matter, no kids were reported injured in the incident, and he was shut down pretty quickly. You have to go to 1964 and clear across the country in Long Island, New York, to find a woman who gave out inedible objects to children, plastic, metal, steel wool, dog biscuits, and there were a few bits of ant poison in there. So we're going nearly 5 years between incidents across the country, and there's no connection whatsoever between them. There's no satanic panic here. There's no cult. There's no connection whatsoever. And they're widely spaced apart. You then have to fast forward to 1970, which is just basically media hype again, which got everybody upset. There was the Chicago Tylenol murders in 1982, and they started a month before Halloween. So it's one of those things where, a murder around the time of Halloween, you got a Jack the Ripper situation going on where children are being threatened by their parents. Look out, or Jack the Ripper will get you. Well, in this case, it was the Tylenol killer is going to give it to you. And in 2019, the Massachusetts Cannibal Commission, it's cannabis, not cannibal. There's another show. We should worry about that one later. But the Massachusetts Cannabis Commission was warning that there could be cannabis-laced treats. Now, realistically, if you're into the consumption of medical cannabis, or if you know anybody who is, those things are not cheap. You can buy a box of candy for the price of one lollipop. So, I mean, what kind of irresponsible druggie is giving away that much money? Not a very smart one. It makes no financial sense. It makes no sense whatsoever from a motivational standpoint. But here we are just 2 years ago. We can't really count last year because, unfortunately, the pandemic removed that Halloween from us, mostly. But so basically when we look at the record, it's all hype and no substance. It's a fear of the other and the fear of the unknown, all wrapped into one. Now, these are important psychological motivations, this fear of the unknown. And part of it can be attributed to the fact that as a society, as a Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic society, we don't associate with our neighbors anymore. Once upon a time, there were community groups, like the Lions Club. You might have heard of them. There would be sewing circles where the women got together and, people would socialize. Men would hold barbecues. And sorry, I'm using women and men because this is the 60s and 70s that we're talking about, and the gender roles were a lot more stratified than they are at the present day. So I apologize to anybody that might have been offended, but if you're offended, you don't know history. I'm speaking about history here and the way things were. Now, things have gotten better. In 2021, I'm happier that we're integrated, that we welcome different cultures. We welcome, different genders. We welcome different opinions, unless we post them on Facebook. That welcoming only goes so far. We still have this implicit fear. I live in a wonderful neighborhood. I know probably half the people on this street. If not by name, then in passing, and my significant other knows a lot of them too. We have no fear of our little munchkin going around door to door and collecting candy. That being said, there's still that fear there. Once we get off this street, we don't know the people on the other streets. And that's where they always say, have an adult with you. Now, a child predator would have to be pretty brazen to grab a child off the street in Halloween when the police presence is up and everything is maximum. A child poisoner would have to be pretty stupid to give candy out because it's going to be real easy for the police to figure out which house did it. Oh, we all went on this street. Okay, we can narrow it down to this number of homes and we know which candy did it. They'll have it down in no time. One thing about 2021 is that our information gathering technologies are outstanding. Just fantastic beyond belief. But that information and statistics don't stand in the way of a good spooky story. And that's what it comes down to again. Fear. Humans like to be told there's something spooky out there. Halloween encourages the fear that's in people's hearts. We like people to be scared. We like people to challenge their perceptions this time of year. And by the media perpetuating this myth, it only makes things worse. Now, that being said, I want to emphasize, if one thing Silverlight stands for, first of all, it's critical examination of the headlines, but the most important thing would be safety. Knowledge is safety. And in this case, knowledge of what's going on is important. I don't think I would trust homemade goods, and that's only because I've seen other people's kitchens. Nothing against people in general, but yeah, a lot of them, Gordon Ramsay would throw a fit if he saw most people's kitchens, is all I'm saying. With justice, I can see him not liking certain things about my kitchen. I'm okay with that. But once again, that leads into fear of the unknown. If it's not perfectly clean and up to date, then it would be something that people would not want. Fear of the unknown. We are starting to get more and more immigrants and more integrated as communities. Does the new couple down the road even celebrate Halloween? No way of knowing. And if they do, where did they get their candy from? Because I can tell you there's a lot of different types of candy. So if you get past something that's not trying to think of something, a jawbreaker or, a Tootsie Pop or something that you're familiar with, you don't really know how to evaluate it. And I'm going to pick on the Indian culture for a second, and I mean proper Indians. Some of their sweets are just ridiculously sweet. Wow, they're tasty, don't get me wrong, but they do not skimp on the sugar. Indians are some of the best chefs in the world, don't get me wrong, but their desserts, oh my God, those things are sweet. And they're probably turning around and saying, well, your desserts just don't have any flavor. And I accept that criticism from them. But that's one culture I have a lot of experience with. The Philippine community, on the other hand, doesn't go quite in. So they like their sweets. They just don't like them quite so sweet as what I see the Indian culture breaking out. But there's this one thing that I know, and it looks like a ball of ice cream. And that thing is almost pure sugar. It's not ice cream. It's just sugar on sugar on sugar. I don't need a lot of sugar. We don't need a lot of sugar in this house. So maybe I'm overreacting to it. But everybody I know says it's awfully sweet. But I would have no way of evaluating whether the samples I have tried are representative of the whole or whether they're, like McDonald's. McDonald's versus Burger King. They both have burgers. They're both nearly identical, but there is a difference in the taste. And there's no way of evaluating one over the other. And that's part of the fear of the unusual. If you suddenly find yourself at Wendy's after a lifetime of McDonald's and Burger King, yeah, Wendy's is different and unusual. And the burgers, they're square. That's weird. Every other burger you've seen is circular. The same is true with Halloween candies. I also suspect some parents will use it to pick out their favorite candies and, oh, that one might not be safe, I'll take it, and that way they have their treat for the day. Okay, I'm not going to judge parents like that. Good little trick. I'm not going to say anything. But once again, listen to the narrative. When you have reporters and news media outlets saying something and there's no real evidence to back it up, then they're preaching a narrative. They want you to believe. And that is one of the scariest things of all. Why on earth would they have you in fear? Because a state of fear is a state of being able to be controlled. And by controlling you to buy factory produced candy that you recognize, and you will reject anything that you are not given, they've done a pretty good number on us over the past 50, 60 years. And we all subscribe to it, even me with my rational mind. I'm sitting back and saying, I recognize the myth, but I'm not willing to go against it. Community is the way that we can get back. We have to start being friends with our neighbors. Even if you're in an apartment complex, maybe it's worthwhile to get to know your neighbors. You're going to wind up bumping into each other, waiting for the elevator one day. With a smile on your face, you can make a couple new friends. And our friends and our allies are the only ways that we can challenge the mega corporations and the multi-billionaires. Take care of your child this Halloween. If you don't have a child, take care of yourself this Halloween. We wish everybody nothing but the best as always. If you enjoyed this episode of the Silverlight Show, please like, share, and subscribe. And we hope you have a fantastic day.